Welcome back. It's Lauren and Gina here for another episode of Dear Higher Self. And today we are just diving right in to one of the biggest questions ever existed, which is, why are we here? What is this? What is happening? And all of the subsequent questions that come from that one, right? So we are going to be talking, yeah, right. What WTF? I'm going to try not to cuss. Probably won't last long. But yeah, really, like, what are we doing here? What is the point of all of this? Why are we here in this lifetime? And we're going to be talking all about Earth School and diving into some concepts around what we're here to learn, the soul's journey, the spiritual work involved, all of that good stuff. So we're really excited to have you. Thanks for joining along, and we'll get started. Gina, I'll just go ahead and open it up. Why are we here? What's the simple version?
This is quite literally, I'll say, my second favorite topic to talk about, intuition being number one, but talking about the rabbit hole of what I call Earth School and the point of all this just like geeks me out. Like, I swear we could go 3 hours on this one if we had the time.
I'm here for it.
But I know you and I have talked so much about this prior, just in our friendship and long road trips on the way to the Tucson Gem Show of like how
Yes.
this all works. And we love reading all these kinds of books and doing the knowledge. I feel like I've read so many books. I've connected with my own guides on this to try to make sense of it. I'm always trying to, as much as I'm faith-based, I feel like I love the science, and I like to know how things work and the mechanics of it all. I'm like, okay, but like make it make sense mechanically. And I think that's been something that's been ingrained in me since I was a little kid, because I can remember being, oh gosh, I was probably in like fourth grade. So however old you are in fourth grade, like 10, 11-ish. And wondering that same question as a kid, being like, okay, but like, what is the point of all this? Where do we come from? Is God real? Like, how does all of this work? And I remember I had this book that I think was actually my mom's from her childhood, and it was like a children's Bible. It had this like 1970s like gold cover on it, and I remember opening that looking for answers, and it started, of course, talking with like Genesis and Adam and Eve and the apple and the rib, and I just remember being so confused and being like, well, now I have more questions. Like, this, not that I don't believe in it, but like this just made me have even more like questions, and this doesn't really like answer the like mechanics of it all. Like, where did they come? Like,
Yeah.
how does all this work? And I think that's kind of how I ended up eventually going down this like spirituality rabbit hole. But I don't know. We've talked about this. You've had a similar upbringing with wondering this yourself
Yeah.
too, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think exactly what you said. It's like that mixture of faith with science. And I think that's where our society really is anyway these days. I mean, I feel like we've swung a little bit too far onto like the science rational side overall in general, right? And so I think a lot of the work that people are doing now in like the healing space and in the spaces that we take up, it's like, you know, kind of bringing some of that like faith and some of that like kind of nature inspired like wisdom that we've sort of disconnected from, because we have been so focused in the last several, you know, I mean, honestly, like hundreds and hundreds of years, really so focused on like the technology side, the science side. You know, we have to like prove everything, that Newtonian model, right? So it's that balance. But I 100% agree. Like my upbringing was similar in that way of just like having a lot of questions, not really having any answers. Like my family was partially Catholic, but we didn't really practice anything. We would go to church like once or twice a year, and it always just made me feel kind of like an outcast because I didn't really understand like what the, you know, the rituals were there, what people were singing, what they were saying. Like I didn't get it. And I think I had a lot of curiosity from like an early age about these things and just didn't really know where to turn. And you know, you can only go on like so long like that, I feel. And then the universe is going to kind of provide you with some guidance and some direction. So, yeah, we touched on this a little bit in the last episode too, the journey around that. But I would say it was similar to you, just really like asking a lot of questions, kind of looking for more there, and then things naturally starting to fall onto my path that started to connect some of these dots. And but still, it's been over 10 years that I would say I've been on like actual like deep spiritual work, and I'm still like, I don't know. Like, I think I know, but I don't
Yeah,
really
the more you
know.
know, the more you realize you don't know. It's
Exactly.
how
And
this all works.
actually, I just was remembering, I listened to a podcast a couple months back. It was the We Can Do Hard Things podcast. And it's like the only podcast I listen to besides ours, obviously. But they were talking about the best advice that they've ever received. And people could call in and like just give really short stories of really great advice they received. And at the end of it, Glennon Doyle was saying like the advice that she would have given years ago, she would have had some sort of answer to that question, right? And then it would have changed throughout points of her life based on like what she was going through. But now she was saying she's at a point in her life where she just doesn't know. And she's like, it's such a beautiful place to be because all the things I thought I knew were like true and like steady were actually things that like no longer apply to me now, you know?
Yeah.
And they went down this whole rabbit hole talking about that, like how you kind of just get to a point where, yeah, it's almost like the more you don't know, the better. Like the more you don't know, the more you do know in a weird way. And so I think that's where it's like just kind of approaching everything from a sense of curiosity. And, I encourage everyone who's here today to like lean into these topics with that sense of like childlike curiosity, right? Like
Yeah.
we were all little kids, we all had questions, right? And it's like a lot of us have grown up with this like trained mindset of, question everything, look for proof. What is everybody else believing? What is everybody else saying? How do I fit in? Right? When in reality, this topic it's the question we've been asking since our very first question, right? Like it's every single generation, every single human has contemplated this at some point. So it's deep, but I think it's like coming at it from this sense of you're never really going to know. And also I think that's why we're here, is to continue to feel into that and to have experiences and to kind of like always coming back to that unknown that's actually like the deepest knowing you can have, if that
Yeah.
makes any sense.
Yeah, I feel like for me, I've come to this place where it's like, here's all the data that I've pulled together so far, just from like what I've read and what I've understood with my own guides, and like I realize that that's just a placeholder, and that
Mm-hmm.
I'm not like married to it all. It's like this is the most that I can understand right now at this time, and
Yeah.
as we continue to like evolve and ascend spiritually, it's like your brain can understand more, and like as you kind of ascend as a soul, you're able to like conceptualize more. But like back in the day, some of these topics, like you just wouldn't have been able to like
Yeah.
conceptualize them like we are today. And that's going to continue down the road. Like when we're much older, it's like I think our brain will be able to handle more, because I feel like I often read that because it's so heady and because of where we are in the 3D, like we couldn't fully wrap our heads around it. Like there is
Yeah.
no English word to explain how this all works and why we're here. And so it's like we have this like really like childlike definition of it that only scratches the surface of why we're here. So it's like, okay, yeah, like I could have all this
Yeah.
information together and be like, this is exactly how it works. And like, the way that I love to like structure it all and like make like a flow chart of how it works. But it's like, it kind of just is this like one dimensional story to something that is so many dimensions large that we just
For
can't
sure.
even go there with. And I think that's what's so cool, because it's like you can keep pulling on this string, but you're never going to get to the end of it. And I think that's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Um, and a lot of what I know, we've both read this book, but a lot of what I've learned about it has come from the book Journey of Souls by Michael Newton, which I highly recommend to anyone who is interested in this work. But what's cool about Journey of Souls is, well, Dr. Michael Newton was doing this. So he's a hypnotherapist, and he was regressing his patients. Well, first of all, let me say that Dr. Michael Newton back in the 90s was like a science guy, not faith based. And he was doing hypnotherapy as a part of like therapy and not from the spiritual sense. And when he
Mm.
started regressing his patients back to accidentally in between lives before, this lifetime that they're in now and after the one that they had incarnated from before, and was able to talk to them in that space, he like didn't believe it and fought it because he was a science guy, and he was like, this doesn't make any sense, they've got to be making this up, and he tried to disprove it, which I think is really cool about it because he wasn't just somebody who was like gonna take it at face value. But after doing like hundreds of these, he realized that a lot of people were saying the same thing about why we're here and how this all works. But what's even cooler about this topic is around the same time in the early 90s, Dolores Cannon, who is more spiritual based, she wrote a couple books because she was doing the same thing around the same time in a different part of the US. And she was regressing people in between lives as well, again, accidentally. And a lot of what they came up with in their data and in their books is the same. And it's not like they were talking to each other. So, as much as I love all the faith based stuff, it's really cool to be able to see this data and this documentation from two different people who had zero connection with each other, who accidentally stumbled upon this same technique to get these answers, and the answers are pretty similar to each other. It's wild. So
That is
I've
so
read
cool.
both books, and they're both so good.
And I'm sure there's even more work out there that just never got, the publicity or didn't reach that level where it's like, it's not as well known, but it's like all of these people who have stumbled upon this wisdom and this like universal intelligence, and it's like it's almost like when you were telling that, it almost felt to me like it's like the universe like trying to make itself known, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like, hey, like I know you don't believe in this, but I'm going to put all of these people into your practice that are going to all have these similar stories, and it's like I'm going to show you, and what are you going to do with that? And I think that's so cool.
Yeah, it's wild. But what I love so much about it is how they both the authors explain how we choose this life, and we actually
Mm-hmm.
get to see it in a way, almost like walking into a movie theater and watching a preview. It's like, okay, you can have this life, and here's like a 3 minute clip of like all the possibilities of the most um, likely things that would happen if you chose this journey with these parents, and these are the themes that you would learn, or you could choose this flavor over here and be this person, and
Yeah.
this is what that would likely look like, depending on how you chose to do things. And then you ultimately get to pick which one you want to play, which is why I love the whole virtual reality analogy, because it really feels like it reminds me of Mario Kart when it's like, okay, do you want to be Yoshi, Mario, Luigi, the
Mm-hmm.
princess? And then
Mm-hmm.
they have like different skills and qualities. Like one's faster, one's more agile. It's like that's kind of like how you pick your character for life, and I just think that's so fascinating. And I think it's healing to know that, because when you come here and you experience these things, I feel like a lot of us that are into the spirituality realm have had the harder paths and not necessarily the easy ones, and a lot more trauma, whether it be a big T or little t, and that's ultimately what tends to draw us to this
Yeah.
realm of spirituality. But I feel like, I don't know, knowing that kind of makes me exhale a little, and not take it so personally, and switch the frame of thinking from like, why is this all happening to me? Why does life have to be so hard? Like, does God hate me? To just be like, oh, okay, like this is Earth School, and I came here to learn these lessons, and I chose these themes because I wanted to experience what this is like so I can evolve as a soul. And okay, cool. So how do I get an A on this test? What do I need to do to pass? And I feel like approaching life from that angle has just been way lighter,
Yeah.
way lighter, and just way more healing.
Yeah, totally. And there's so much in those books too that like there's so many different ways we could take this conversation, right? Like, I mean, I remember reading Journey of Souls. I don't think I read more than like 5 pages at a time. Like, it took me forever to finish it because it's like every single page I'd be like, what? Like, what? are you
Yeah.
serious? This is crazy. And it just like I had to really digest it slowly. But once I read it, I was like, this makes so much sense. And the Disney movie Soul also is
Yeah.
kind of like this. And then the book Midnight Library. Have you read that book?
Ooh, no, I
By
haven't.
Matt. It's Matt Haig.
Is it fiction?
Midnight Library. It's yeah, it's fiction, and it's if someone is listening and maybe is looking for like more of a fun kind of like this is a book you could read like on vacation at the pool or whatever, but it's literally the same concept. It's like this woman who is really unhappy with her life and she is like kind of in and out of suicidal ideation, like I don't know if I want to go on, like everything's just kind of blah whatever, and then she goes to this like this library that's in this like other dimension, and it's her library and there's a guide there, and she can see all the books in the library are different possibilities that she could take for this
So
specific life.
cool.
Yeah, so it's like little things like if she had stayed with her boyfriend from her early 20s who she had broken up with like years and years ago, had she stayed with him and gotten married, like what would that life look like? Had she taken this other job or had she followed her like childhood dreams to do whatever, like what would her life be like if she had gone that route? And so she goes through and like dips into each different lifetime. And it's just a really cool analogy from more of like a one-on-one perspective
Mhm.
of like that same concept, essentially like studying your lives in between lives. And although this was within one life, right? But it's like the same idea of like looking at all of these different possibilities in like an infinite way. There's all these different routes you can go, but what is the one that's like the most likely to get you
Right.
to learn the thing that you came in this lifetime, right?
Mhm.
And with that, can we touch on like the free will piece involved a little bit?
Yes, but first I want to say what you're describing sounds just like a fictional sense of what the Akashic records are, which a lot of people
Yeah.
describe as a library. And so the Akashic records are supposed to be this, I can't call it place. Um, it's hard. I mean, again, we can call it a bunch of different things, but essentially it's all the data, all the information of what could be in your life and every soul's lifetime, every incarnation, all of time. Like it's the encyclopedia of like everything essentially,
Mm-hmm.
and it's supposed to be like this library of information. And I think that why we often see it as a library is because that's how we think of like information being
Yeah.
displayed and cataloged as such. But I've also read and understood people to understand it as like a fabric of time and how all the different
Mm.
threads, if you think of like a loom and how there's the threads going up and down and then the ones that weave across above and below each of the vertical threads, because everything is connected. And it's like
Yeah.
every life, every timeline, story, every soul's, it's just woven together because it's all connected. And I think that's super cool, and that is a rabbit hole that I am currently going down now and studying. So you could read the records because you can access those at any time and go up there with your guides and tune into that to get information, kind of like you were describing in that book, to be like, okay, do I take the red pill or the blue pill? Do I go left or do I go right? Like what am I supposed to do here, and like what would my soul ultimately want? Because now tying into what you were saying with free will, I think we do have free will. The way that it makes sense in my brain is it's kind of like an algorithm in that you are just more likely to do certain things based on like who you are, the experiences that you've had, and all that. You're just more likely, you have a higher percentage to choose A instead of B or C options
Mm-hmm.
based on everything so far. So the way that my brain kind of sees it is like in computer terms, the way that an algorithm would work, where it's like, okay, you have a 90% chance. I think kind of like sports betting is how I think I can think of this. Is like, all right, there's a 90% chance that this team is going to win, but there's still that 10% chance that they don't, and they can
Yeah.
go into that. And then if that 10% chance does happen, you go left instead of right. It's like it has to recalculate. Okay, from here, because now you went left. Now, what are all the new percentages of the odds that you would go left, right, straight,
Right.
all the different variations that you could take from there. So yeah, I do think that you have free will. You're just more likely to be called towards certain themes, which is why you chose this life, because in this life as this character, you're more likely to do those things
Right.
that you came here to learn as a soul.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. That's wild. That's wild.
What's super cool too that I've learned is that so we come from soul groups where
Yeah.
our soul is paired with other souls, kind of like a soul family. And the experiences that we have here in this incarnation get shared with those in our soul group. So it's like, even though, so like if you and I were in the same soul group, everything that you're learning kind of gets uploaded to, we'll call it the server. Again, I'm going back to computer analogy, but that'll get uploaded into the cloud, and then mine gets uploaded into the cloud, and then we get to share that data. So it's like our soul kind of gets to learn vicariously through the other, to where those experiences, you would almost confuse it for your own experience. Like it just becomes one with like your own soul knowledge.
Do you learn that in the same lifetime, or is it more like if you were my soul, what did you call it? Soul
Soul,
person?
like soul family.
Yeah, soul family. If you were my
Yeah.
soul family and you were uploading info and I was uploading info, do you like have access to that in this lifetime, or is it in your following lifetime?
Um, that's a good question that I'm not entirely sure how to answer. I feel like it's less from the 3D perspective, and that you take it down with you into this lifetime, but more that like your soul on a higher dimension
Mm-hmm.
has that knowledge. Because okay, so let's back up for a second. How I understand it to be is your soul can be in more places than just here. It's like fragmented. So for me, there's me that's up like in the ethereal higher planes, a part of me, and then there's my soul that's down here. But then my soul gets split into infinite timelines of all the different versions of me. So it's like your soul is permeable. Think of like drops of water in the ocean.
Yeah.
You can have a drop over here, a drop over there, a drop in a cup, a drop in a vase, but it's all part of like water. So I think that's a good way to
Yeah.
give it an analogy. So it doesn't have to just be here on Earth at one point. We're all kind of everywhere in the different timelines, and
Mm-hmm.
then up in the higher dimensions. Um, so there's that, and all that information of all the different timelines is getting uploaded, and then as the soul part of you that is up in the higher dimensions, they can use that information and share the information with your soul family, and that kind of gets used, I think, from a higher perspective as you're like
Right.
ascending, because all of this data that's being collected from down here in the 3D is getting used so we can ascend as a soul into the higher dimensions. So it's like this is just, it is like Earth School. It's
Yeah.
studying. And so all this information kind of gets uploaded and used so that way we can ascend higher into the higher dimensions, which is wild to me and exciting because there's so many. So I've read that, like going back to the Akashic Records reference, when depending on how ascended you are and like what level you've reached, kind of like grades, you can only see so much of the records until you reach another level. And I think that's really interesting because again, it's like you can keep pulling on the string, but even in this lifetime, it's like you couldn't even figure it out. That's just,
Yeah.
there's more. It's infinite. I mean, that's where infinity comes from, right? Like they're just, it's never ending in all directions. And I think that it just like breaks your brain open and you're just like, oh my gosh, where do I
Yeah.
even go from here? It's like I could try to figure it out, but I'll exhaust myself. But I'm still so curious, so I'm gonna keep pulling on this string. But like, whoa,
Yeah. Well, and I think it's that whole thing of like, you know, however you want to phrase it, God, the universe, spirit doesn't give you anything that you're not ready to face, that you're not ready to understand or to work through. And I feel like that's exactly this, right? Like if this lifetime you're here to do whatever and to get to a certain point, ascension wise, it's like you're going to get the exact information and opportunities that you need in order to just make that little bump up,
mm-hmm.
right? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
not like you have to figure this all out right now today and like,
Well,
master it.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
There's no pass or fail. Like you just
Because
keep
I will
learning.
say, if we're looking at Earth School as the analogy, there are some people who may identify with being the like A plus plus student in school.
You
I'm
mean us
certainly not one of
overachievers?
them. Not me. Definitely not me. But some people, right? And I think that's like a constant battle I have for myself is like, I'm just trying to figure this out. I just want to have this sense of it's like the ego need to like
Mm-hmm.
wrap my head
Conquer
around these
perfection.
concepts. Yeah. And just, I completely understand why I'm here. I have full understanding of my purpose. And now I can just like live out the rest of my life
Yeah.
taking perfectly
With
aligned
happiness.
action and learning everything I need to learn. And it's just like, that's not really how it works, girl. Like, no,
Mm-hmm.
sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Frustrating.
I know it's like after every ebb there comes a flow, and then you get in that flow and you like want to be done and not have to have the ebb again, and you're like, oh, but I learned
Mm-hmm.
lessons, and we not have to learn more lessons, like again we're going into battle with
Mm-hmm.
myself and life. Dang it, can we be done? And it's like, no, it's what you signed up for. And the whole
Mm-hmm.
reason of that is because it's like the same way that you can read all these books and you can get all this information, but it's not the same as if you were to experience it
Yeah.
first. It's like you can read about, you know, what the death of a parent is like, but until you experience your parent dying, like, and you really don't truly understand until you experience. So you can
Yeah.
use an example in any which way, but until you actually experience it, you could read all about it and not know. So as a soul, you could spend your all your infinite lifetime in the Akashic records reading all the books, but of you know, all these different soul journeys and what they've learned, but it's not the same as actually experiencing it.
Mm-hmm. Right, because when you come here, you don't remember anything, usually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's interesting. I wonder if, I mean, how does that tie in for people who do have a sense of their past life? Like, I really never have. Like, I have seen imagery and sensations through like specific meditations that are meant to bring you into your past life. But I know there's people out there who just kind of have access to that naturally without like being guided or intentionally trying to like pull that information. Do you know any reasoning behind that? Like I'm curious if there's like certain reasons why you might have that knowledge just to begin with versus having no idea or like not even knowing that you've had past lives.
The way I understand it personally from my own just connection with my own guides and understanding is I feel like, I mean, realistically, because everything is all connected, all the souls are connected. Everything is all one. So even if it's somebody else's past lifetime, it could also be someone else's
Right.
past lifetime too, because it's all a
Right.
derivative of one splitting off and splitting off and splitting off. And
Right.
I think that the reason why certain lifetimes tend to come in and connect with you in this lifetime is because there's similar themes there or lessons that you haven't necessarily conquered or learned, um, and that's what's showing up in this lifetime. So it makes sense that like your energy here in this 3D incarnation is kind of pinging that
Mhm.
energy that's happening in a different timeline with a different soul, because everything is happening all at once. So there, when we say
Right.
past lives, it seems linear, but it's actually happening right now because everything is right now. And so it's like you're kind of like on speed dial, like FaceTiming it if you're clairvoyant in your mind, if you're sitting in meditation and then you see yourself as like a witch back in Salem. It's like, okay, there's similar themes here, and like y'all are connecting with your information because it makes sense right now, and that would be why you're not connecting with like Farmer Jim from 1930s, like, because there's no like connection there. But because
Right.
it's all connected, you're able to do that, and it would only make sense that like what energetically you're putting out you would connect with. So just like that works here in the 3D with like you attract the energy that you are in alignment with. I think that happens across the different dimensions and different
Hmm.
lifetimes as well, which is actually scientifically proven. with quantum entanglement and how one particle on one side of the universe affects another particle in a different side of the universe. I mean, it's all
Yeah.
from whatever perspective you decide to look at it from, it's all connected. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's complicated but connected.
It's like the most complicated and the most simple thing ever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, makes so much sense, but also makes no sense at the same time.
Yeah.
It made me think of when you were sharing that, like, it made me think of just that, like, feeling of being mirrored with people in your
Mm-hmm.
life, like, more on the
Yeah.
3D level, but that feeling of,
Yeah.
like, when someone says something or shares something and you're like, oh, I have never experienced what you're talking about, but I can, like, relate to that. There's this feeling of, like, yeah, I connect to that, right? Or you can, like, see yourself in someone. You can just that feeling of, like, I know we're connecting right now in a deeper way than just like, oh, you like this sports team? So do I, right? Like, it's this like deeper, intimate mirroring connection. And I can't help but think for myself when that happens that it is on a soul level of like, I mean, it's like what they say in yoga, right? Like the light in me sees the light in you. And it's like, it's that happening in those moment to moment interactions with the people that you are surrounding yourself with or that like come into your field.
Yeah, which is making me think of soul contracts in that when you decide to
Mm,
come down here and incarnate, there are certain people that you have soul contracts with to help work out what it is that you've come here to learn. So
yeah.
when you have friction with certain people, maybe in your family or just at different points in your life, like there's probably a soul contract there, and that you're each helping each other learn something in there. In that lesson with that experience with that person. I know for me, when I met my partner, I recognized him. It wasn't like I know people always talk about like the one, like, oh, did you like meet him and know? Like it wasn't like that, but I kept thinking I knew him, even though I had never met him. And I genuinely think that like it was just my soul recognizing his soul. Whatever that ends up meaning, I'm not trying to add any meaning to it, but I had never met him before, but I kept staring at him going, I don't know, I just feel like I know him. So the only
Mm-hmm.
way I can like chalk that down to is just I think I just have known him for many lifetimes and knowing him on a soul level. So yeah, I think we have
Yeah.
different contracts to experience different things with those people.
Yeah. And they can be challenging contracts too, right?
It could be good or bad. So like I think for me there's some folks in my family that I definitely think that I have soul contracts with, and we've done this a time or two.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you do with that? Like if you recognize, okay, maybe this is a person who, or how do you even get to that point of like recognizing who is a soul contract, who's not?
Um well, I think whenever there's an abundance of energy, whether it be
Mm-hmm.
positive or negative, I think if it's something in your life that's going to gather that much energy, that there's probably a soul contract there. And I feel like
That makes
knowing all this
sense.
stuff really helps like ground you in it. I feel like for me, it's helped me do a lot of healing with my family, who I've had some turbulent and traumatic times with and relationships. And knowing this has actually helped me forgive and like detach and take it less personal, and just I don't know, step back from the situation and instead just like wish it love of like, okay, like we're here to teach each other, and like hopefully you're learning what you came here to learn, and like I'm sending you love, and I hope that
Yeah.
you get whatever it is that you needed to get out of this, and that you can, I don't want to say pass or fail, but like get what you came here to learn out of it. But I've been able to step back and kind of just forgive and send love of like whatever this is, why ever we keep
Yeah.
having these altercations, I send you love and like thank you for being my teacher.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it goes into the very like applicable 3D advice of like, you can't control other people, right? It's like even with that, it's like, yeah, you can't control how someone's going to feel, how they're going to behave, whatever, but it's like even one step further, like you can't control if they're going to get the lesson in this lifetime, right? And it's
Right.
not your job. But I do think there is a lot of like energetic power in being able to wish that for someone and being able to, you know, at whatever point you feel ready, energetically, you know, detach from them and cut that cord. And I know I've done several meditations and experiences around that, around like energetic cord cutting, and such a powerful experience. But it's one of those things too where I think your ego mind again can have this calling of like, okay, great, I'm going to do this. Like, you know, I'm done with this person, I'm cutting this cord, whatever. And then maybe if you still haven't really integrated that lesson, it's like they're going to just, it's going to show up in something else down the road, right?
Yeah.
Or a different person or a different situation until you really get it. And I think for me, this kind of goes back to like that perfectionism around, you know, getting it. I've almost like been frustrated with myself at times of, you know, I thought I worked through this already. Like I thought I forgave this person. Why is it like showing up again? Right. And I think it's pretty easy to get into that headspace, but I love how you were talking about like looking at it with love and looking at it with appreciation of like, ultimately everything is here to serve me and my growth, right? Every single thing that's in my reality is here to serve me. And when you really look at it through that lens, it's like everything becomes something that you can have gratitude for and really
Mm-hmm.
look at through this light of like holy shit, like this is incredible. And it's just so hard when you're in the moment. It's
Yeah.
so hard when you're in the moment.
It's hard when you're in your ego because your ego takes it personal and it's like, why are you doing this to me? I can't believe you did this to me. And it's like, it's this like pointed finger, like you and what you did to me. And now I'm hurt because of it. And when you're in that
Yeah.
space, which is totally natural, and it's okay to be in that space and feel your feelings within it because that's part of the human experience. But
Yeah.
after you've kind of been there for enough to feel your feelings, when you can pull back and look at it from the macro perspective and then reframe that story from like what they did to you to then just like seeing it for the data of what it is of like, okay, what is this here to teach me? Why am I
Yeah.
reacting in this way? What does this reaction remind me of from my childhood? Where has this pattern
Right.
showed up in my life previously? And then it's like working with that and making it your own inner journey and less about what the other person did to you, quote unquote, because
Yeah.
they're just there to mirror in you what you came here to learn and what is getting stuck there in your human ego so you can go from fear and transition into love like we talked in the other episode about, because when you can be just pure love energy like that, that is enlightenment. That is the end goal, I guess, of where we will eventually go. But here in the 3D, there's duality. You have both. So you're
Yeah.
here on purpose, so you can learn where you need to go to kick back into that love area. So when you can, you have to be able to slow down enough and pull back from the situation and take it less personal. Which, when you know this information, I feel like that gets easier. Of like, okay, this is Earth School. This is here to teach me something. Where has this pattern shown up before?
Yeah.
What am I supposed to learn here? And becomes less personal and more
Yeah.
just like, okay, here's some data to look at, and what can I learn from this data to heal and move on from?
Yeah.
And
And
then
I
move
think
on.
having that framework to begin with, it's like many of us weren't taught this in school. We weren't taught this in our childhood of like, if this is the belief that you're choosing to have, which again, it's like, you don't have to. Many people don't have this belief. Many people don't think that you have past lives. Like, that's fine, you know, but if this is the belief that you're choosing to anchor into, and especially if it's not something you've had all along and you're choosing to see the world this way, it can take some time to really like let that anchor you, right? And to be the lens through which you start seeing the world. So it's like, if maybe this is one of the first times you're hearing this, or you're kind of like new to this like framework, you know, I think it can be helpful to just remind yourself that it may take some time for you to actually like see your life this way and to
Oh yeah,
really like, right, like
adopt it
understand this.
and
But
integrate it.
um but with that said, I feel like um I'm having like the weirdest deja vu right now, which is like,
Oh,
yeah, I'm like yeah, like wild. Like I feel like I've like said this verbatim in this moment maybe in a past life, maybe
Glitch in the
this is one of those
matrix.
moments. Yeah. But I think having that framework and being able to see through that lens, it gives you the ability to scale back, like you were saying, and not take things as personally and kind of treat everything as like a homework assignment in earth school
Mm-hmm.
of like, okay, what is this triggering in me? And then from the sense of if we're all fragments of this like one consciousness, on a soul level, and or have had similar past life experiences or have had the past life experience of someone else, right? If we're all one soul, essentially, like fragmented down, then the things that are triggering you in these other people or the things that you're being attracted to in these other people tend to just be parts of yourself. So for me, being able to look at it from a very practical way of like, well, what is it if we're talking about being triggered by someone who's being an asshole? What is it about that person acting like an asshole that's so triggering to me? And
Yes.
like when you really peel it back, sometimes it's like, well, I have the capacity to be like that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe I was like, maybe in my last life, I was that person. And now I'm on the other end of it, receiving this treatment and feeling how it feels to be the one who's being treated this way. When in
Yeah.
the past life, I was the one causing that pain to somebody else. And so you start to see it from just this like multi-dimensional way of like, okay, really, we're all capable of doing amazing things and doing the worst things. Like we're all capable of this
Mm-hmm.
entire spectrum. And I just feel like it's even a gift in the way of not just noticing, you know, this information to help you grow more, but just to give you that expansiveness too, that sense of like what it's actually like to be here as a human and like to have this choice every day of like, how am I gonna live this go around, right? And like knowing that you can always, in a way, start again. Um, and I think seeing it through this lens has, at least for me, it's given me so much peace and so much assuredness that it's like, okay, this is literally designed to support me. And so
Mm-hmm.
even though it feels frustrating in the moment, it's actually really here to help me grow. And just choosing that belief feels so much better in my body than, what the fuck? Why is this happening to me again? Like, what is going on? Right. So, a long winded way to get back to your original point, but I feel like it's just, having that framework, being able to kind of start small where you can, again, like we talked about before with your intuition, it's a muscle that kind of needs to be trained of
Yeah.
seeing things this way. When you're adopting a new belief, right, you have to start like seeking out proof bit by bit to show yourself that can be true for you, right? So these little moments when you're able to look back in retrospect and be, oh, I see why I needed to have that experience. I see now, after several years of this person being out of my life, the lessons they brought to me, right? And
Yeah.
maybe reflecting on that a little bit to find like that concrete proof of how this can be true for you might be a helpful exercise, just to like let it land somewhere so it doesn't feel so like, what,
Yeah.
you
I
know
and I think for me being in my 30s, like you have enough data now to pull from to go, okay, there are themes here. There's this thing that keeps showing up in my life, or these kind of people, or like whatever it may be.
yeah.
And then you have enough of the different situations to where if you had the time one night while you're journaling to like really break it down of like, okay, this theme keeps happening and this is how this one showed up and this is how that one showed up, and like where can I draw the similarities between the two? How did I feel about that?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, this is me being like an uber psychoanalyzer, and I have sat and done all this stuff because again, I'm like, let's break it all down. I'm like,
Yeah,
what is like a
I want
beautiful
to
mind
color code
model?
it and like put it all in a chart.
No,
Give
that
them
theme has
categories.
well, for me, I'll just tell you, I legitimately did that because one of the main themes in my life has been romantic relationships and how those have gone. Like I've had quite a few serious romantic relationships throughout my life, and I feel like that's been primarily where I've learned a lot of my growth and lessons. So I think that's how I've chosen in this lifetime to learn up until this point, was just through the different partners that I had, and so obviously had gotten really tired of experiencing breakups and heartache and all that. So it was like, okay, how do we nip this in the butt? Because I'm done with this way of learning lessons. So I got out paper and I wrote every significant relationship down, what drew me to them, what their own kind of issues were from their childhood, why we broke up, kind of how that felt. And I mapped it all out, and I was trying to find like the correlation between the two, because I was like, whatever lesson I am not learning here, I'm going to figure it out now, and you're going to get past this. And I had brought it into my therapist's office one day, and she was like, okay, well, like, you'd make a good therapist. This is stuff that like I would take people through, but you kind of just did it on your own. But there's a second piece to this. And so then she had me write out all my caretakers and their qualities. So, like, the same thing I had done
Mm-hmm.
for all of my past partners. And we highlighted each caretaker a different color and then figured out where the different lessons were with each of. So there were some past relationships that were mirrors of like my mother and the issues that I had with, the mother wound, and then some with my father. And so I've chosen different partners because everything goes back to your childhood. So we connected all
Yeah.
those dots, and I was able to see kind of where those wounds were and heal it. So there's all data there. So by the time you're in your 30s, you have plenty of data to draw from if you feel like sitting there and looking at it.
Yeah. No, I love that. I can relate teeny tiny bit. There have imago therapy. Have you
Yep,
heard of? Yeah, so that's
that's exactly
basically
where all
what
that
that
came from.
is. And I also did something similar where you would journal out each of your main caretakers and then their positive traits
Yes,
and the more challenging things that you
exactly.
experienced with them. And then with your relationships, like, why did you initially become attracted to this person? Like,
Mhm.
how did that start? How are you feeling? What did you seek out in them? And then why did the relationship end? And like writing that all out. And then you can correlate. And the way it was explained to me was it's like, all of these traits from your caretakers are like in this like stew. So there's like the good, the bad, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, like your role models growing up, your what you got from the media, what you got from this, what you got from that. And then it's just this big giant bowl of stew, and then your partners come from there and like teach you different things. And one of the questions that was so helpful for me too with this was like, if you could go back, what is the thing that you wanted to say or the need that you wanted met that wasn't met?
Yes.
And noticing how that ties into your relationships and the problems you had in your romantic relationships. And I was like, hot damn, like
Yep.
this is deep, but it's really good. And I do think from a soul perspective, like, if you're thinking about past lives, it's kind of similar in that analogy of like the stew or the soup, right? Like all of these things getting thrown in there,
Yeah.
and then it kind of shows you these opportunities. Doesn't have to be in romantic relationships, but it's like these little things that
Yeah.
get
These
put in your
dynamics.
way or that you attract that are showing you these areas of growth.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a really good example.
Yeah. It could be just romantic relationships, it could be friendships, it could be how you
Work.
interact at work. Yeah, it really could go across the board with whatever themes are showing up that you could relate this back to. But like what you were saying with the stew, it's like, yes, primarily it's going to mostly be the stew from this lifetime, from your childhood. But what's also part of the stew on a smaller layer is your DNA with all your
Yeah.
ancestors and what they've gone through, because it's like they have passed the baton to you as the next one in line to go continue the storyline of what
Yeah.
they may or may not have, because again everything is intertwined, so it's like you're kind of taking on their unfinished business in some ways,
Yeah.
from a DNA perspective. But then you also have your different lifetimes and what you're carrying and bringing into this lifetime from a karmic perspective of what you came here to learn, what's outstanding, what you maybe didn't conquer in the last lifetime. So it's like it's a braid. There's a couple different layers here, but like the main vein, if you will, is your experience from your childhood. But then you have all these other little like sparkles that get added onto it to make it a little bit more complicated. Okay, so referencing the braid again and how it's kind of all tied together, not just from this lifetime, but all your lifetimes and your ancestors. Because everything is so tied together, you have help on this journey as you're going through life, which we kind of talked about in the last episode when we were talking about your higher self and your intuition. So your intuition, the way I understand it, is it's your channel and the way that you can have communications be sent to you. And that could be from your higher self, but it could also be from your ancestors. It can be um, other parts of your soul from other lifetimes. Like you can call upon you, because everything is happening right now, you can even call upon past versions of yourself, just like you can call on your higher self, which is kind of like a future version of yourself. So there's different energies, entities that help guide you. The way I see it is kind of like the Hunger Games, if you've seen the movie. So with the Hunger Games, when they're in the game and then they have the sponsors that will like send them gifts throughout the game to like help them win. I know this is a terrible reference given how the world is going right now, but it's kind of like that. And like your guides are like your sponsors. So, oh, I forgot to mention guides. They're not necessarily incarnated here, but they're here just to like help you as like a coach while they're still in like the spirit realm. So they could all connect with you through your intuition and help you and guide you like your Hunger Games sponsors in this lifetime, to help you make those decisions. So when you feel those pulls to go left instead of right, that could be coming from your higher self, from your guides, from your ancestors. And I don't think it really matters if you know which one is which. I think for a lot of us, we just get these intuitive pings,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't necessarily need to like break down like, well, is that my grandma like from like this lifetime? Is that my guide? Is that my higher self? Like for some of us that are more connected, I think you could tell the difference sometimes, like who's coming
Yeah.
through, but it really doesn't matter. Just take the guidance and go with it. They're all rooting for you. It's all connected. They're trying to help you. And I think that that's really cool, and helping you know that you're not alone on the journey.
Yeah. Yeah. When you said Hunger Games, I instantly thought it's sort of like Phone a Friend on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
Yes,
I
yeah.
was like, this is a very different reference, but similar.
It's a little easier on the nervous system for a
I know.
reference.
I also just side note, like that show, I used to watch it when I was like a kid, and I would always get so confused because I'm like, how are these people just sitting by their phone? Like, I like thought that it was like completely spontaneous. Like, oh, hello. Oh, hi, Regis. Like, of course I can help with this question. Like, didn't have any idea that it was planned, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
fine. It's fine. The like original reality TV. But yeah, no, I mean that makes a lot of sense to me. I feel like I have started to like be able to distinguish between the different guides and different avenues only recently, and it's something that I never really could notice before. So it's interesting. I think even just sometimes like hearing this concept and knowing that it's possible, and just even like saying yes, I'm willing to like consider this to be true, or I'm willing to see if this could be a thing that I can experience. And I think just sometimes like asking for that, and you can start to notice a lot of different things come your way. Maybe it's through dreams, maybe it's through,
Mhm.
like we talked about before with your intuition. Like it can come in as a song, it can come in as like a chance
Yeah.
encounter, or like a weird synchronicity that you have, like through that deja vu moment I had earlier, right? Like there can be these little things that but again, it's like having the awareness to actually like label them and notice them. And the more you notice them and the more you place your attention there, the more that energy will grow, right? And you'll just start to receive more and more, the more open and aware and willing you are to like hearing this and receiving
Mhm.
this.
Yeah, kind of like the trust muscle.
Yeah.
The more that you build it, the more it'll come in. Or just, I mean, kind of like the same way if you see a car that you like, and then all of a sudden it seems like everybody's driving that car. You just keep seeing it over and over again. If you start looking for signs and communications
Yeah.
from your intuition, whoever that may be, like you're going to get more the more open you are and you're looking for it. You'll notice it
Yeah.
because it's everywhere. You're getting the messages all the time. But
Yeah.
what I like about being able to understand and conceptualize that there are different players at hand here, and how if everything is connected, you can call upon them for different things. So it's like if I'm cooking or sewing, I'm calling on my yaya, my great grandma, to like help me because she has that knowledge. So it's like I know her energetic software programming, because I like the
Mm-hmm.
computer analogies, like has the coding that I need to do what I'm trying to achieve. So like help me out with this recipe versus like even I don't want to go too much down this rabbit hole, but like with your past self, for example, like there are skills that you had as an older version of you that maybe you overcorrected at a certain point in time where you learned a lesson and you maybe got rid of that skill because you didn't think that it was safe, or you overcorrected on it, and it's like now here you are, you need that skill of the older
Yeah.
version of you that they had. It's like you can call and work with an older version of yourself to be like, hey, you know, college age Gina, like I need help with this thing that I'm going through, and you're really good at that. Like you've always had a knack for that. Like help me with this, or just generally asking like your guides in general to help you. So it's like you can call on the different whoever you think could help you. I mean, it could even be God. You can work with whatever deity it is that you believe in, whether it be like God, Buddha, your angels, whatever it is that you believe in. There's different players to call on who can help you better with certain things. Like there's a lot of people who work heavily with the angels, and there are certain angels who are better at helping with certain things. So you can call
Mm-hmm.
if you lose something. Oh, I forgot which one is the one where if you lose something, there's a certain angel, I can't remember his name, that you call upon to help you find whatever it is that you're missing, because he's like, that's what that angel is for. So
Yeah.
yeah, and it's, I think some people get like weird about that because it's like you're not supposed to worship anything but God, that's what it says in the Bible. So I could see somebody coming from like a Christian based religion being like, oh, that makes me feel funny, but it's like I don't think you're worshiping anything. You're just, it's the same way that you would call up a friend and be like,
Right.
hey, I'm making, I'm a new
Right.
mom. You're a mom. You've been doing that for a while. Can you help me? Like,
Yeah.
what am I supposed to do here? How do I navigate this? So
Yeah.
I don't necessarily see it as like a worshiping thing and a praying thing to something that's not God. I just think it's like a phone a friend situation, just to another dimension, because it's all connected. So
It's like an
I'm,
energy exchange. It's like, hey, I
yeah,
need a little bit of your energy in this particular area,
yes.
and I'm open to receiving it. Help
Yes,
me.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. So I feel like for a lot of people who come from that Christian background could like see this if they're new to it and be like,
Yeah.
oh, resistance, resistance. And I hope that that explanation can give
Yeah.
peace to that, that it's like, okay, you're not worshiping anything. It's just,
Right.
it's all connected. The same way that like Wi-Fi is connecting us for this conversation right now, you can meditate and tune in and connect with an angel, a loved one, whoever, and
Yeah.
do the same thing. Help me with
Yeah.
this thing.
And I think too, there's so much power in storytelling, and we are creatures of stories, right? Like that's how we passed information down before we had all of this crazy technology, right? And so much of that was around different gods and different goddesses and different powers that, you know, explained things we couldn't explain. And I
Yeah.
think, like I was saying earlier, it's like we've shifted so much into this like rational, logical, like it must be proven true in order for me to believe it, that we've lost so much of that ancestral wisdom. And for me, I've found a lot of encouragement and a lot of empowerment in like reading and researching some of these stories of goddesses and the way that they showed up throughout time and how they're different between different parts of the world, but have like similar themes and similar messaging.
Yeah.
And just being able to tap into a few that like really really call to me. And I have a couple on my altar actually who it's like the little I mean I got them on like Etsy, these little, you know, statue things.
Cute.
But it's a good reminder of like, okay, this to me like symbolizes abundance, this to me
Symbolism.
symbolizes like, yeah, like this, and it helps you call in those qualities. So it's not as much of like I'm worshiping this like thing, right? It's more so like, no, this energy is what I'm like, I need more of this in my field, and I'm calling that in, and I'm doing it in this way of like letting my rational brain wrap around like a story and a meaning and a symbol. And I
Yeah.
think that's really, you know, I think it's something we're missing, and it's again a muscle that needs to be retrained in us because we've lost that so much even from childhood to adulthood, but then it's like over the last several generations, you know. And I think it's coming back, you know. It's like slowly, I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
the power of social media is actually in that, you know. It's a way to connect, but it's a way to tell stories again, and it's a way for people to like share these common threads that we all have in similarity, and you start to like read or hear what someone is sharing, and you're like, oh, like, yes, like I relate to that, and there's this like similar messaging. And I think it's coming back in that way, which is nice. And then, you know, obviously through the million books that we reference on here, it's like another good way to go about it. But yeah, I think finding the symbolism and energy work that you're looking for and then pulling it in that way can be really effective too.
Yeah. Gosh, I feel like we can go down a whole new rabbit hole on this, but there really is so much continuity between all the different themes and times, like time periods and what they believed, and fast forward to another time period and what they believed, and it all is so similar from different religions to different time periods. If you really distill it down for like what it is, there's so much overlap between the two, and it's like if you could pick out what those are, that's what I think is so fun with it and what I like to
Yeah.
run with. Because it's like, well, we're never going to know. So maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. Maybe we're all just kind of a half bit of right. Like, I'm going to do a create your own situation over here in this lifetime for myself of like what just makes sense to me, because there are so many different repeating themes, like even down to like colors and the planets and what those represent, or numbers and what those represent, the tarot cards and what like if you like you can map them all to each other, where it's like blue is equal to this planet is equal to this tarot card equal to this goddess. Like there's so many themes, and it's like pick your choice of how you want to
Yeah.
play with symbolism,
Yeah.
and allowing that to help guide you. And I just think that's so cool.
Yeah.
I've tried to conceptualize that because, you know, I like to like put everything in flowcharts to make sense of it. But I'm like, no, I can start, I'm starting to get the downloads that tie them all together. And I want to map it out, like what is being downloaded to me and how the
Mm-hmm.
colors map, the numbers map to the planets map to the astrology signs, and just like kind of build this big map
Mm-hmm.
of how it all just distills down, because that's how my brain works.
That sounds like a good project for you to work on. I'll
Yeah.
help you look at it when it's done. But it does kind of go back to what we started with around like, you know, I don't know, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I think that's like a good place to wrap it on this feeling of, you know, I think you can really sit and think about this all day long, but at the end of it, it's really about what makes sense to you, what's calling out to you right now, and what of this feels true to you. And if there's something that doesn't feel true to you, but you're like, maybe it could, you know, I think that's where a lot of us start, just by leaning into that of like, you know, how does this fit in with my current belief system? And where does my current belief system even come from? Is it even
Mhm.
mine? You know,
Yeah.
and what feels true to me, and does this thing feel truer or less true? And how do I know that? And just starting to really develop that discernment, you know, through your intuition, through these things we talked about in the last episode of like, you know, where am I going with this, and how do I want to show up in this lifetime? And then, you know, like we said, developing this framework of which you can look at everything from this sense of like gratitude and appreciation that everything is here to serve you. And, you know, ultimately it's up to you if you choose to participate in that.
That is a perfect bow to put on
Yeah.
everything we just said. Well done.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you
Thanks
so
for rounding
much.
us out there, Lauren.
Yeah, it's a big topic. So, I mean, that's what
We
this
could like even
podcast is
take
all about.
episodes
And
about
yes, and
this.
I know we will go deeper and deeper and deeper into many of these little, you know, segments here in future episodes, but I think it's a good starting point, and it's something that, you know, we definitely want to hear from you on as well, and what questions you have, and um knowing full well that we're not experts, right? Like I think that's an important thing, is
No
it's
one is
like,
an expert.
right,
Literally no.
no one knows for sure, but like we can start the dialogue and know that it's an ever evolving,
Mhm.
you know, curiosity that we all hopefully have here in this lifetime.
I'm sure this will spark a lot for people who are listening. So
Yeah.
whether it be questions or your own, you know, opinions and thoughts and experiences, we want to hear from you on that. So definitely join us over in the community at dearhigherself.me, if you're not already a part of it, and let us know how this one is landing for you and what it has stirred up, because we will get in there and dig deeper.
Thank you so much for being a part of this episode today. And hopefully, this helped just at least start to scratch the surface, answering some of these big questions that we had in today's episode. So, if you are not already a part of our community, we definitely want you there. It is a space for you to connect with like-minded people who are in similar journeys as yourself. And you can join us over at dearhigherself.me to find the link for our Facebook group. We'll be posting additional resources, journaling prompts, additional things that you can kind of dive deeper into after each episode. So if you're not already there, please join us at dearhigherself.me and be sure to subscribe. If you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast so that you'll hear when we launch new episodes, any cool updates that we have for you as well. And if you are enjoying it so far, we would appreciate it if you could leave us a review. And that is it for today. We thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you in the next one.